Welcome everyone, this is Dr. Mercola, and today I'm here with Bobem Capelli, who is the Vice President of Cyanotech, which is the largest grower of astaxanthin in the world. And you might be wondering what astaxanthin is. Well, it is a derivative of a marine algae. It's a very potent antioxidant. And Bob actually is one of the co-authors of some literature that was written about astaxanthin, which is a very powerful piece. And after I read that, I was so intrigued with it, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But I was so intrigued that when Dr. Oz called me last year and asked me what's the latest and greatest in supplements, I said, well, I just read this book about astaxanthin, and I'm very excited about it. And so he had me on the show, we shared it, and interestingly, the entire national supply of astaxanthin ran out within a few days. So it was the power of the presentation that Dr. Oz has. But one of the reasons I was interested is because it's, in case you don't realize already, but astaxanthin, as you'll elaborate in great detail, Bob, is what actually makes salmon orange or pink, and then it puts the pink flamingos into pink. I mean, because typically flamingos are born white, and they only develop that pink color after they're eating this pigment from this algae. So welcome on our program, and thank you for joining us. And I'm wondering if you can share with our viewers how you became interested in this and sort of discuss your journey in this whole process, because I'm sure it's a fascinating story.
I hope so. I've been about 20 years in the natural products industry, and I started in distribution of many different products. This is back when I lived on the East Coast in New Jersey. And after about 10 years working in that job, I tried astaxanthin, and I found remarkable results. It was incredible.
So you personally tried it?
Absolutely. So this is about 10, 12 years ago. And what I found was...
And how did you hear about it?
It had just come out. It was a new product. It was the strongest antioxidant. I want to see for myself exactly what it was all about. And I play basketball, and I've been playing basketball for years, usually about twice a week at nighttime. And back when I was in my late 30s, when I was working in New Jersey, I would play basketball, and the morning after, I'd be so stiff, or not here, but my knees mostly, stiff and sore. And my wife used to make fun of me. She said, you walk like Frankenstein in the morning, because I was just stiff, like a monster. And I started taking this astaxanthin, and within about a month, I'd spring out of bed the morning after basketball. I felt like a 20-year-old again. It was really incredible results for me.
Quite dramatic.
Yeah.
That's excellent. So you had some personal experience with it that showed that it worked. And so what was the next step in your involvement?
Well, the next step was that I sought out the job that I'm currently working at for this the largest producer in the world of astaxanthin, and it's been great ever since then. So I've gotten very into the ingredient. What I've also found...
so for the last 12 years, you've just been pretty much exclusively focusing with the astaxanthin?
We actually have two products. We have astaxanthin and we have spirulina as well. Okay. So it's really, we're like a two-trick pony, pretty much.
And it's because they're both from marine-based organisms, and the growing process or the farming process is very similar.
Exactly, yeah. They're both from microalgae, and two very different species of microalgae, but the spirulina is a blue-green algae. It has a blue pigment in it as well as the green chlorophyll. Astaxanthin is a green algae. And what we do, which is very, very interesting, is we're in Hawaii, and there's intense sunlight there. And so the astaxanthin grows in a few different stages. In the first few stages, it's always covered. It's either indoors or it's outside, but it's covered. The last stage, the final stage, we call it the redding stage. It goes from green to red in the period of just about 1 week. And that's because what it's doing...
How long does it take to grow before that stage?
It takes about 4 weeks or so before it goes to the final stage. And there's really 3 or 4 distinct stages.
And you can continually harvest throughout the entire year, every 4 weeks, because there's essentially virtually regular daily sunshine in Hawaii.
In Hawaii is the ideal place to grow astaxanthin, any microalgae. It's the perfect location. We're not in Honolulu. We're on a remote island. And
which island are you on?
We're on the Big Island, on the Kona side, and it's just awesome sunlight, and it's no pollution, and the water is perfect as a growing source. And so what we do, we create stress to this algae, and we do it 2 ways. In the final stage, we put it out into the sun, and the sun's so intense that the algae has to develop a defense mechanism to survive. The second thing we do is we stop feeding it. And when we stop feeding it, and we put it out in the sun, in a period of just about a week, the green algae goes to this intense red color, because it has hyper-accumulated astaxanthin. And what it's doing, it's almost it's a survival mechanism. It's creating almost like a force field to shield it from the sun and the lack of food. This algae can live for over 40 years, doctor, with no food, no water, in either intense heat, intense sun, or even intense cold. As soon as it's put back in favorable conditions, the algae turns green and starts swimming around again. It's perfectly healthy.
That's fascinating.
So you can imagine if it's helping the algae to that extent for 40 years, protecting it, what it's doing when we ingest it in our bodies.
Well, it seems to me the obvious analogy here would be that the algae are producing this acid, very similar to the way our own skin cells produce melanin in response to our normal exposure to the sun. It maybe doesn't increase as rapidly, but it essentially serves the same purpose, to protect us against excessive ultraviolet radiation. So with that, since there's such similar responses from the organisms, can you share with us your experience or the literature that you reviewed with respect to using astaxanthin as a supplement orally and maybe topically in helping protect against sunburn?
Well, that was one of the early studies that our company sponsored, was to test in humans. There had been actually some rodent studies before that with hairless mice to put them under heat lamps. And by the way, our company does not sponsor any animal research, but these were mostly done in Japan. And but they showed that by ingesting astaxanthin, the mice could stay under UV radiation longer without having any sort of sunburn or deleterious effects, damage to the skin. We did a test in humans, willing subjects. We found in just 2 weeks, with only 4 milligrams a day, that there was a statistically significant increase in the amount of time the subject could stay in the sun without getting burned. So it absolutely is working as an internal sunscreen.
Okay, great. So it will. Now, obviously, there's a lot of variables that are present, primarily the color of your skin and the time of year, the intensity of the sunshine and such. But for the most part, it will not eliminate sunburn in most everyone, but it will radically reduce your risk of developing severe sunburn and consequently, and perhaps more importantly, the risk or the damage that sunburn incurs, because no one should be getting sunburn. There's no expert would disagree with this. That's something that's universally accepted. We need to avoid getting sunburned because that causes not only photoaging, but it can cause skin cancers and perhaps even other damage you're yet unaware. So we want to avoid that. One of the ways to do it is to do cautious, prudent sun exposure, but then clearly for at least a 2-week time, 4 milligrams of astaxanthin. And is there any benefit of taking a higher dose for protection, or is it sort of peak out at 4 milligrams?
No, that's actually, that's a good question, doctor, but many people take a lot more than 4 milligrams, usually anywhere from 4 to as much as 12 milligrams per day. And we found the research, depending on what you're taking the astaxanthin for, varies quite a bit. For a UV protectant and for actually to improve the skin's appearance, it actually works, believe it or not, as an internal beauty supplement as well, because it can actually reduce fine wrinkles around the eyes. It can improve skin moisture and skin elasticity. So that's about a 4 milligram dose. But for other things, like for, say, joint problems, for athletes, up to 12 milligrams is usually indicated.
Interesting. So we'll talk about some of those other applications, but just addressing the beauty treatment, which sounds bizarre, but actually I recall reviewing a study published earlier this year, which pretty much definitively proved that. I'm not sure if it was beta carotene or some type of carotenoid that people were taking. The study looked at that objectively examined a whole group of people who had taken this carotenoid and who hadn't, and the people who had were subjectively evaluated as being far more attractive than the group that hadn't, just because in the color, because it's a subtle color and you wouldn't necessarily recognize it consciously, but subconsciously it just appears to make you more attractive. I mean, that was the conclusion of the study. So I thought it was fascinating, and I think astaxanthin does it even better because it's it really gives you this pinkish color, whereas an orange tint that beta carotene might, because it's the color. Have you ever seen anyone taking massively high doses? I haven't noticed yet, but I know I've seen a number of people who've taken large amounts of carrot juice, and they have this almost a sickeningly brown, yellow, or orangish color to them. It doesn't look healthy. but it's sort of the extreme. But I wonder if you've ever seen anyone taking large amounts of astaxanthin and have a pinkish color.
Well, we actually have one guy who works at our company who takes a lot. He takes about 40 milligrams a day, which is well above what is really necessary. But he's an athlete, and he feels it really helps him. And the only thing that I've noticed in this guy is that not his skin in general, but the palms of his hand have become like just a little bit more reddish, let's say.
Okay, so
other than that, really no difference in his skin.
40 milligrams. So let's talk about some of the other benefits. One of the areas that intrigued me when reading the literature you compiled was the benefits in sports, and there were a lot of elite or competitive athletes who were using it and anecdotally had been very impressed with the results and their ability to work out harder and perform better in their competition. So I wonder if you can address that.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of endurance athletes that are taking astaxanthin, and a lot of them are just raving about it. They love the stuff. There was a study about, this is going back probably almost 10 years ago in Sweden, of young men that were training, and they had them doing deep knee bends, as many as they could do, until exhaustion. And they put, obviously the control group taking placebo, they put the experimental group taking astaxanthin. That was also a 4 milligram dose. After 6 months, the young men working out taking placebo could do approximately 22% on average more deep knee bends. The ones taking the astaxanthin could do 62% more. So they were getting stronger 3 times faster than those taking placebo. So absolutely for strength and endurance, it works wonders. Recovery from exercise, athletes generate a lot of oxidation, a lot of free radicals floating around their bodies from doing these intense workouts. And because it's such an incredibly strong antioxidant, it's helping to combat those free radicals. So it's working in a few different ways to help athletes.
Excellent. So very exciting because exercise is really one of the crucial components that we recommend, and obviously most people realize is necessary if you're going to be optimally healthy. It's in my view, certainly more powerful than most drugs, and with respect to the benefits, and virtually no side effects except for these injuries and overuse syndromes which can happen, and astaxanthin would be useful to protect against that. So it also seems to be, is an antioxidant, it seems to have some very powerful anti-inflammatory benefits. So as a result of that, it seems to be useful for a number of other diseases that are associated with inflammation. And one of those would be, of course, arthritis. So I'm wondering if you could talk to us about that and kind of the doses that people use, and if you notice if there's a difference in specific joint injuries from sports or injuries or accidents, or osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis or other types of arthritic conditions.
We've actually, that's a good question, Doctor. And we've done a few different studies in that area, and all of the studies we've done point to the same final conclusion, that the astaxanthin is not going to cure these problems. It's not curative, but it will absolutely help with having people feel better and definitely increase mobility and also to reduce pain. So we've done a study, for example, rheumatoid arthritis is much harder to treat than osteoarthritis, and we've done a study on that where believe it or not, about halfway through the study when the results started kicking in, and by the way, astaxanthin takes usually at least 2 and up to 6 weeks to really start kicking in. It doesn't work overnight, so don't expect to take a pill and an hour later.
It's not like an aspirin or an Advil that you
not at all. But again, most of these other anti-inflammatories have some serious side effects.
Of course.
So,
like death.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and astaxanthin, safe, natural, no side effects, no contraindications. But it's going to take a little while. But people, about halfway through the study, were asking the people in the treatment group taking the astaxanthin, not the placebo, were asking the researcher, "What is this?" A lot of them with rheumatoid arthritis had tried many different things and had not gotten results. Now with astaxanthin, they were getting very good results. Just took about a month or so to kick in. We've done studies on people with carpal tunnel syndrome. Again, very good results. People with tennis elbow actually made their grip strength 93% stronger in 8 weeks. So obviously, if you have tennis elbow, it's one of the bad side effects is that your grip strength gets very weak. These were all different studies on people that had certain conditions. We did another study on a group of people that were just, again, athletes, and to test about joint soreness after heavy exercise. And so this was people that had no afflictions, but also Same thing. Placebo group had after doing heavy exercise had serious joint problems, joint pain. People taking astaxanthin much reduced, almost to a point of no joint pain after doing heavy exercise. So it'll work whether you have an issue or whether you're perfectly healthy as well.
That's great. So some pretty profoundly impressive results. And I like the fact that you mentioned that it really isn't a magic pill, that it clearly relieves symptoms. It doesn't work as quickly, but it relieves symptoms, and in many cases far more effectively than the far more expensive and potentially toxic and dangerous prescription anti-inflammatories or over-the-counter ones, certainly, which can be equally as dangerous. But it's not a magic pill, and if one uses it for these conditions, then one clearly needs to look at the foundational causes, which in many cases is going to be the diet. Too much sugars and grains that are increasing insulin levels and increasing inflammatory prostaglandins, so and modulating the fats to make sure you're having good fats and enough essential animal-based omega-3s, and then also looking at biomechanical stresses like in tennis elbow. You've got to look at weak muscles or tight muscles and do range of motion exercises and strengthening exercises to address those so that you get collectively do it. But as part of a comprehensive program, it really looks like a magic bullet, but I just want to warn people that they really need to address the foundational causes. And in many cases, that's going to be required to visit with a healthcare professional who's knowledgeable about natural solutions and not, the traditional conventional doctor who's just going to see you for a few minutes and write a prescription for you. And because clearly you could do better than that. You could do a lot better than that just by reading on the internet. But clearly what you don't have by reading on the internet is the knowledge of someone who's really carefully studied this and is aware of all the potential complications and variables that might be factors that you're not aware of. So just a caution for everyone.
These are good points you're bringing up. And one other thing I like to bring up with this is that for really one reason we believe not everyone gets really good benefits from astaxanthin. Most people do. About 85% of people in studies and also in surveys get fantastic results for several different things. There's about 15% of the population, and the reason why we think this is because many people have a very poor ability to absorb carotenoids, of which astaxanthin is a carotenoid. So people absorb anywhere from as low as 5% of the carotenoids in their diet or in supplements up to over 90%. So say if your body absorbs 90%, you're going to get a great benefit even at like 2 to 4 milligrams a day. If I'm only a 5% absorber, I might take 12 milligrams a day and get almost no benefit. So it's not a magic pill. It works for about 85% of the people. It works usually in about a month or so. It starts really kicking in. But then you're going to get many benefits. We talked about joint pain. We talked about skin. And there's many others as well.
I definitely want to hit those, but certainly address the point you just mentioned, which is respect to the fact that it's not going to work for everyone, which is, if you claim that or anyone claimed that any pill works for 100% of people, I would be beyond skeptical. Because whatever, I've seen, in my 30 years of practice, I've seen probably thousands of different therapies, not only supplements, but a whole variety of different modalities. And there's no modality I'm aware of that works 100% for everyone all the time. So clearly this is the case with astaxanthin. But one of the little, but the tips that you brought up that I think everyone needs to be aware of is that astaxanthin is a fat-soluble supplement. So if you don't take it with fat, it's not going to work too well.
True.
So you've got to take it, kind of think this through. Definitely take it with a meal, but understand which meal you have the most fat. For most people, it'll probably be dinner. But if you're having a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of butter or 4 eggs, those are the meals you want to take it with, because those fat-soluble supplements will sort of dissolve the astaxanthin and allow it to be absorbed into the intestine, into your bloodstream, where it's going to do the action. So that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing it up. So one of the other ones that I can remember off the top of my head that astaxanthin seems to be useful for is the most common cause of blindness, at least in the United States and most Western countries. It would be age-related macular degeneration, or ARMD, and it takes the vision from more people than any other cause of disease. So apparently this seems to be a particularly useful therapy in the prevention of this type of blindness, but I'm not sure about what the studies show for the treatment of it. So I'm wondering if you can comment on that.
Well, there's been quite a bit of research on astaxanthin for eye health in general, and one of the areas you brought up for sure is one of them, for age-related macular degeneration.
Oh, and the other point was cataracts too. So you include that in your answer. So
yeah, definitely age-related macular degeneration, cataracts. There's some interesting properties in terms of many people nowadays that are working on computers all day long are getting very tired eyes. Astaxanthin absolutely has been shown in 9 different human clinical studies, 9, to be able to prevent tired eyes and also to be able to help cure once you have tired eyes. So it's helping to maintain the motor function of the eyes at the highest level, just like it is your other muscles.
and my guess is these tired eyes, and I'm not familiar with the name, the medical term for that, is actually one of, at least my understanding, is one of the primary reasons why as people age, they tend to develop what is called presbyopia, or they lose the ability to focus in close, so they can't read really well, and they have to move the book further out, and that requires them to wear these reading glasses. So that's typically due to tired eyes. So I would imagine it may be beneficial for that too, presbyopia.
There's no studies in that area. I don't believe. Actually, I remember the word. It's called visual accommodation.
Oh, visual accommodation.
Yeah, as your eyes get tired from overuse. But I would imagine that also it would be very good for that. Also, visual acuity, in terms of the ability to see fine detail. Also, another thing of the eyes would be just protecting the eyes from sun damage. Just like it protects our skin from UV damage, it's also protecting the eyes from sun damage. So it's really, for eye health, it hasn't been known for as long a period of time as some other products, but all the research points to astaxanthin being really the champion of the supplements for eye health.
Yeah, because the traditional one would be lutein.
Absolutely, which is great too.
Which is still good, but it appears from all the evidence that this is far superior to lutein. If you only had to use one. I'm not saying you can't, it's an either-or situation, but certainly that would be the case. And the mechanism, many people don't know that before I went to medical school, I was actually involved in recovering eyes for transplant, and actually enucleated the eyes from the cadavers, and in many cases would remove the lens, and they would transplant that lens. So I've definitely seen up close lenses, and for those who haven't had the opportunity to do that, the lens is like the crystal of an old crystal. When we had regular mechanical watches, there was a lens cap on that, and it's somewhat similar to that. It's like it's an elliptoid though, but it's very clear. It's crystal clear, ideally, at least in a newborn. But as we age, we're exposed to ultraviolet radiation, and the older you get, the darker it becomes. It becomes this yellowish amber types of color, to the point where it becomes so densely amber that it actually obstructs the rays from coming in, and you can't get enough light going past that lens to the back of your eye. And the reason the lens is there, of course, is to help focus. It accommodates it. There's muscles surround it, and it helps focus the light so that you can see sharply. And when that focusing ability becomes impaired, then you can't see that well. So, and many times cataracts aren't as big of an issue, which is why I didn't think of it initially, because now we have a pretty good surgical technique that removes the lens and puts in an artificial lens, which works pretty well as surgeries go. It's relatively innocuous, but still, wouldn't it be better not to have that surgery? I think the cataract surgery may be the biggest line item budget in the healthcare system. I think it's so frequently done. It's a phenomenally common. Almost everyone seems to get it as they age because it's progressive. But it's sort of a tangent. The reason I mention this is because I haven't studied this, but I suspect you have, is that the reason it prevents these cataracts is it's a similar benefit of protecting against sunburn. It actually blocks the ultraviolet radiation, which is why the marine algae are producing to begin with when they're exposed to all this sun. So it's basically transferring that protective benefit to the lens. Is that the mechanism?
I don't know whether that's been proven, but that absolutely seems like that would be it, yes.
Okay, great. So are there any other therapeutic applications for astaxanthin that you'd like to discuss or review with us?
Well, sure. For example, just like it can help protect the eyes, bring anti-inflammatory and very strong natural antioxidant protection to the eyes, it also does the same in the brain. And there was very little research on the brain until pretty recently. In just the last 2 years, there's been 10 different studies demonstrating that astaxanthin can have some very, very good effects for the brain. 2 of these were really gold standard human clinical trials, and all showing sort of the same things, that it can prevent dementia as we age. One actually animal study, again over in Japan, showed that it could potentially actually make the rodent smarter. I mean, that was, you know, not really demonstrated in humans yet, but that's kind of an interesting thing, not just for people as they age, but for anybody that just wants to have their brain functioning at maximum capacity.
Now, how many people would want that?
Yeah, I know I need it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because Alzheimer's is literally an epidemic. I mean, the projections are that 1 in 3 of us will lose our brain as we age, which is really a sad commentary because, of course, we want to live older and enjoy life as long as we can, but we want to enjoy it with the full functioning capacity of our brain. What is it good to be 90 years old if you can't remember your children or your spouse?
That's true. But, you know, so the brain health, another area also is immunity. There's been several very nice studies on how astaxanthin can help increase immunity. There's a great study at Washington State University in humans that, you know, really demonstrated this very, very effectively. And there's been other things, you know, looking at, you know, potentials for cancer, tumor reduction, things like that. We don't talk about those as much because there have not been human studies in that area. These have been all preclinical animal trials. But basically, like what I try to summarize with is that astaxanthin, if you kind of look at all of the negative things, the maladies associated with aging, anybody 40 and older, I mean, anyone I know, I tell them really take this product because it's helping in so many different ways. It's helping your eyes and your brain. It's helping the heart, for sure, the whole cardiovascular system. Over 40 different studies in that area. I mean, fantastic research. It's helping your immunity. It's helping your skin. I mean, right down the line, helping with joint pain. It's really, again, not the magic bullet, but in terms of what we have out there.
It's part of the puzzle.
It's about the best thing.
You know, so you mentioned cardiovascular disease, which tends to be one of the leading causes of death. How about the other two major ones, which would be cancer and diabetes? Have you seen any literature connection and studies that have looked at astaxanthin's potential benefits there?
Yeah, believe it or not, in both of those areas there are studies, but they're only animal trials so far, and there's been no human clinical research so far in either diabetes or cancer. But there are promising preclinical work.
And part of this is because it's only been available for about 10 years or so. So
That's
it
exactly
hasn't
true.
been on the market that while, and most people may not appreciate the fact that the process that research goes through is initially it's thought of it as something that should be studied, then it's done in animal trials first, and then it progresses to clinical trials. And that whole process, each stage could take many years to do that, especially as new indications are outlined. But from a theoretical perspective, it seems to could play a very important role in these diseases.
Absolutely. And again, most of all these things kind of are tied back into its incredible antioxidant potential and also its anti-inflammatory activity.
So if we could give our viewers some sense of perspective, because that's always useful. So you said it's a powerful antioxidant, but you know, powerful is a word. Can you provide some more objective parameters of how compare to some of the more traditional antioxidants that people would be familiar with, like vitamin E or vitamin C?
I mean, there's been so many different tests where they take astaxanthin and put it head-to-head against other well-known antioxidants. And in every test, and there's different ways to measure, by the way. There's several different ways to measure antioxidant strength. Every one of them, astaxanthin consistently comes out way above the others. Vitamin E, comparing singlet oxygen quenching, it was 550 times stronger. CoQ10, 800 times stronger. Vitamin C, in one of the studies, again, this was singlet oxygen quenching, it was 6,000 times stronger. Now, compared to some other antioxidants, like, say, lutein, and, you know, it might be only, 10 times stronger. But overall, whatever you're comparing it with, it's consistently well above all the competitors.
Okay. Well, it brings me to another point, too, because I don't want to give it the appearance of this miracle new antioxidants. You take this, you don't need anything else, because it's definitely natural. It's in nature, and it was probably if you eat salmon, and we'll talk about non-farm raised salmon, wild salmon, you're getting astaxanthin. So it is part of the food supply normally. It's not typically there, but we'll talk about typically ways that you get it. But the point I want to address now is the fact that it's not that you just need astaxanthin, nothing else. Even though it's stronger, there's other potential applications of these other antioxidants. So we need the whole ball of wax, would be my guess, and especially things like vitamin C, which are water soluble. But so I wonder if you can address astaxanthin's role in the broader picture of antioxidants, and then discuss the fact that even though it is fat soluble, it appears to have some water soluble antioxidant benefits too. So it's a lot of questions in there, but I'll give you
Well, good questions though. And astaxanthin is pretty unique in the sense that it can protect the entire cell. And the astaxanthin molecule is it's in the same family as beta-carotene and other carotenoids like lutein and lycopene, but it's very, very different. The shape of the molecule and the ends of the molecule. And the one end of the astaxanthin molecule can actually be protecting the water-soluble part of the cell, and it spans the cell membrane, and the other end can be protecting the fat-soluble part of the cell. So it can protect the entire cell. So first of all, it gets throughout the entire body. It gets in the skin, the muscles, the brain, the eyes, the heart. So it's getting everywhere, and it's protecting all the cells and the whole part of the cell. So it's really unique in how it works. Another thing that's really interesting to note is that many very good antioxidants, under certain conditions, can change and have the opposite effect and become pro-oxidants and actually cause additional oxidation in the body. Astaxanthin,
the reverse effect.
Exactly. It can start doing damage. Astaxanthin has been shown in a few different studies never, ever to be able to become a pro-oxidant. So it's never going to hurt you. It's only going to help you.
That's very. But how would you place its role in comparison to something like vitamin E and vitamin C if people are taking those? Would you encourage them to continue to? I mean, obviously you need it from food sources, but the question really becomes supplemental sources because there is a lot of good literature and evidence that suggests that vitamin C has some benefits, and especially taken on a regular amount. So I'm wondering if you could sort of provide perspective on, at least from your view.
Sure, absolutely. I believe that, first of all, like you said, you have to eat a very healthy, well-balanced diet. I mean, I believe you should be eating 9 fruits and vegetables a day. 5 is
well,
great.
I like 9 vegetables and fruits.
Okay, yeah.
More the powers in the vegetables and the fruits.
Yeah, that's true. Now, how many people do that? Very few. That's number one. Number two, look at our life nowadays compared to, say, our great-grandparents. I mean, we're living in a world where there's so much air pollution, there's so much, the water in a lot of cases isn't very pure, the foods are full of preservatives, we have increased sun exposure because the ozone layer is thinner, we have much more stress than any of our ancestors had. I mean, all of these things I just mentioned are causing additional oxidation in the body, and so even if you eat a really good diet, taking some good antioxidants in supplement form on top of that is really important nowadays because of all the extra oxidation happening. So, I believe in I take a couple extra antioxidants myself in addition to astaxanthin. I believe in taking at least 3 or 4 good antioxidants on a daily basis.
Okay, so wide spectrum is a form of insurance because, and again, and to reemphasize what you just stated, is that we're not recommending that this is a magic pill is going to solve all your healthcare problems by any means, shape, or form. The most important approach you can take is to take control of your diet and making sure you're eliminating processed foods and sugars and having plenty of the healthiest food that you can possibly have, because that's going to provide the basis of the raw material that your body needs. But for these applications we're talking about, especially if you have these injuries or these conditions that may benefit from them, which most people seem to have, then it is a good idea, because just in the case of cataracts, just about virtually just the fact that you go outside, you're at risk for that, even if you wear UV protecting glasses. So I'd like to address the issue that some people are somewhat skeptical because it supposedly is not part of the diet. And actually, even before I do that, though, because that argument is brought up frequently for krill, but krill, as many people know, is my favorite recommendation for animal-based omega-3 fats, which are really essential and really difficult to get because of the industrial influences that have really contaminated most of the oceans in the world with pollutants such as mercury and PCBs and dioxins. So they get bioaccumulated in the fat or in the fish or most marine animals, and as a result, the ideal form of these animal-based omega-3 fats are not typically available just because they're contaminated. So one needs to find a source. Some people use fish oil, and I like the krill for a variety of reasons, but one of the primary ones is that the krill actually live in environments where these marine algae that grow, that produce astaxanthin are taken. So there is an intrinsic amount of natural-based astaxanthin with krill, which is relatively small, not in a therapeutic dose that would produce many of the benefits we're taking, at least if you take the normal dose of krill, but it's there in a way to protect the oil, the very fragile and perishable, highly perishable omega-3 fats, which are, when they're exposed to oxygen, pressure, light, will be oxidized and damaged, and body won't be able to use it. So it basically, at least I've looked at some of these studies, it almost guarantees that you're not going to have any oxidized omega-3 fats, whereas it just is not the case with fish oils, because there's so many areas and there's no protection. They don't have astaxanthin there, so it's not protected. The moment it hits light or air or oxygen, you've got damaged fat. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent, but getting back to the food sources, we mentioned earlier that if you're eating wild salmon, you're going to get a therapeutic dose, and maybe you can talk about the amounts you get in wild salmon. But can you mention any other typical food sources that people would encounter in their diet that they might be getting some astaxanthin just from eating the food?
Yeah, pretty much anything that's red in color that comes out of the sea has astaxanthin in it. So you're looking at shrimp, lobster, crab. Of course, salmon has the highest concentrations. In salmon, it tends to concentrate mostly in the muscles, mm-hmm. and so the theory is I don't know if this is proven, but the theory is that that's what gives the salmon this incredible endurance to swim upstream for weeks mm-hmm. to spawn. So it's in trout as well. It's, several different species have it in there, but again, not in big doses. In salmon, if you eat like a wild salmon, the species that has the highest amount is called sockeye, and this is common up around Alaska. If you eat about, I think it's about a half to 3/4 of a pound, you're going to get the same amount of astaxanthin that you get in one 4 milligram capsule. So you have to eat quite a bit of salmon to really...
Yeah, and typically it's a little bit too much salmon for most people to be eaten in one day. Typically 3-4 ounces, maybe twice a day, but even so, you're still going to fall a little bit short of what we consider a commonly used therapeutic benefit. At least the minimum dose is 4 milligrams. Because as you said earlier, you can go up to 12.
Yes.
Some people use more, but that's getting to ranges that we don't necessarily think are useful or necessary. Not useful, but necessary. So, but that you emphasize wild, and of course, the vast majority, I don't know the numbers, but it might be even 90% of the salmon that people would consume, either at the grocery store or in a restaurant, certainly almost all restaurants, would not be wild salmon. They would be farm-raised salmon. And if you're going to choose salmon, I believe it's ideally raised salmon is a healthier choice than meat in most cases, at least in my view. At least that's the conclusion I'm reaching. So if you're going to have it at a restaurant, you're going to want to ask whether it's farm-raised or wild. So can you talk about, because they look pretty similar. I mean, to the naked eye, it might be difficult to distinguish the two. So is there any astaxanthin in these farm-raised krill?
In the farm-raised salmon, actually, there's a lot of astaxanthin, but it's synthetic astaxanthin.
Are there any dangers with synthetic astaxanthin?
Synthetic astaxanthin so far is allowed to be fed to fish. It's not been allowed anywhere in the world yet, in any country that I'm familiar with, certainly not in the United States or Europe or Japan, to be given directly as a supplement to humans. There's not enough really safety data on direct ingestion by humans. But when you eat the farm-raised salmon, you're actually getting synthetic astaxanthin. Now, synthetic astaxanthin is produced from petrochemicals, from oil. And it's made in a laboratory in a very elaborate process that turns it from oil into astaxanthin. Frankly, it's a pretty amazing feat that they've figured out how to do this. But
the miracle of modern chemistry.
Yeah, and that's it. It's chemistry, and it's not natural, and it has a very different shape. The molecule actually is shaped differently.
So are the isomers the same? Because isomers chemically could be the identical molecule, but an isomer would be a mirror image of that. And then there's other variations of that with respect to, so it could have the same actual atoms, but the orientation could be shifted, or even the positioning. So has that been looked at?
That's exactly what it is. And if you look at the chemical formula for both natural and synthetic astaxanthin, it's the same. Mm-hmm. I don't have it memorized, but it's carbon and hydrogen,
sure.
Oxygen, nitrogen. But again, the same formula doesn't mean that it looks the same and
works the same.
Exactly. The very important difference, Doctor, is that the natural astaxanthin is esterified, which means that either on one end or both ends of the molecule, there's a fatty acid molecule attached. So that is, again, this is not proven. We don't know why, but that's the theory of why it works so much better, because in animal tests that have been done, synthetic versus natural astaxanthin, there's been a remarkable difference in all sorts of things like immunity, disease resistance, growth rates, strength, all things like that. And also, in a laboratory test on antioxidant strength, the natural astaxanthin from algae, believe it or not, was 20 times stronger in free radical elimination than synthetic astaxanthin from petrochemicals. So it's really like comparing apples to oranges. Have the same name, astaxanthin, but again, one is very different from the other, and they don't even look the same under a microscope.
All right, so this is yet another reason to avoid farm-raised fish, specifically farm-raised salmon. It really should not be on your diet. You should avoid it like the plague, because you're going to get synthetic astaxanthin, which has not been proven to have the same benefits we've all just discussed, and potentially has as yet unknown toxicities, which is one of the reasons why it's not been approved for human consumption. But you're getting it indirectly through the fish.
True.
If you have farm-raised salmon. So stay away from it. There's a number of other very good, compelling reasons to avoid farm-raised fish. If you're on my site, just do a search engine on at the top of each page has a box that you can type that in. You'll find a load of articles that discuss that in greater detail. So with respect to supplemental astaxanthin that people can purchase, are there any supplemental astaxanthin products in the stores that are synthetic versus natural?
So far, again, they're not approved. Now, to tell you the truth, I think that they are going to be trying to get them approved in the very near future, because thanks a lot to your talking about it, astaxanthin has become become a phenomenon. Many people are using it now. The usage of astaxanthin has probably gone up tenfold in just the last few months.
Okay, well, and let's talk about it, because earlier this year I was on Dr. Oz show, and he's replayed that interview a few times. So that is increased awareness of the value of this product, and people are not ignorant. All they have to do is go online and research it themselves, and they'll read the studies and find out that this is true. We're not pulling the wool over their eyes. This is really authentic, real deal, valuable resource for health. So I'm wondering if you could, because I don't have access to this data, but you're in the industry. Can you tell us what happened? I think I mentioned earlier that I thought that the astaxanthin was sold out, but what has happened to the increase in the demand for this product since it was on in the beginning of 2011?
Well, I mean, fortunately for us that have been producing it for a while, the publicity that you generated on Dr. Oz has been fantastic, and it's gone from a supplement that even people working in a health food store barely, if you walked into a health food store back last year and asked them, do you have some astaxanthin, probably only 1 out of 10 would even know they had it on their shelves, if they had it on their shelves. And now pretty much I think you can find it in most health food stores across the country, and lots more people are taking it, and the word of mouth is becoming even bigger almost than the publicity, because people take it, and that's the nice thing about the supplement, that most people feel the difference. Within a month or so, you start saying, hey, I'm in the sun and I'm not getting burnt. Mm-hmm. Hey, my little fine wrinkles around my eyes are diminishing. Hey, I'm not getting colds and flu. My immunity's built up. Hey, I get a better workout. I mean, my knee pain's not as bad. They feel it, and they tell their friends and relatives, and so it's really it's snowballing.
Yeah, it's you can fool many people initially, but to fool them persistently, it's very difficult to do. So there are really, there's no attempt to fool anyone here. It's just really describing the benefits that are very clear, because we could promote anything we wanted to. It doesn't make life is too short to be not telling the truth and being honest and just sharing what we learn as we go along this journey in life to find the best resources and tools to really take control of our health. Yeah. So astaxanthin appears to be one of them. It's clearly not my ultimate supplement. My ultimate supplement is vitamin D, which they're not either or. You do both, and I don't particularly care for vitamin D as a supplement, but I care for it for getting it the same way that the algae produce the astaxanthin, as was when they're exposed to sunshine. So I think there's just so many benefits when we get vitamin D. We raise our levels of vitamin D through the sun. So ideally, you never swallow a drop of vitamin D at all. You just get it from the sun exposure or a safe tanning bed and avoid it. But those two, I think they're essential. They're part of my daily regimen, is making sure I get sun exposure on a regular basis and take astaxanthin, along with some good probiotics and fermented foods. So it doesn't take a lot, but they're really a good comprehensive way to really provide this protective umbrella against all the contemporary industrial intrusions that we have as a result of technology. and all these exposures, which really didn't exist 100 years ago. So we need, I believe we need a little extra protection if we're going to achieve higher levels of health. So how has your company been able to keep up with this demand? I mean, have you been, because what has happened? I mean, is it double, triple, 10 times?
I mean, it's gone up more than double, yeah.
Okay.
And fortunately, we had like a very nice big inventory before this hit, and so that's kind of gotten us through.
Because you're the world's largest producer of xanthan.
We are, yes. Yeah. And so it's, now, for the first time, we're, up against we have no inventory, so it's just every bit we produce is going out the door, but we're looking at ways in the future to make sure that we can take care of everybody's needs for astaxanthin.
Okay. So are there any other hints or pearls of wisdom or any exciting new research on the horizon that you might want to share with us?
We don't really talk about the research that we do ourselves until it's published, because that's, we don't want to jinx things, or we don't want to let the cat out of the bag. But the one thing that you talked about before is always take it with food and with some fat in the food. That's one of the keys, because I think some people like to take their supplements in between meals, and with some of them it's not an issue. With this one, it's a major issue. You're not going to get the benefits. You're not going to see the results that you would if you take it with your meal of the day, like you said earlier, that you get the highest amount of fat in. It's going to help your body absorb it. That's really the ticket. And again, don't expect it to work overnight. It's safe, it's natural, but you're not going to see results for at least 2, usually, and up to 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, well, great. Well, I really thank you for taking the time to come from Hawaii to join us and share with us your wisdom on this phenomenal new product that I think really most everyone watching this should seriously consider adding to their regimen, at least exploring for themselves. I mean, they might be part of the 50% of the population that doesn't benefit, especially if they're not taking it with the fat, like you mentioned. In my case, I take it with avocados and egg yolks in the morning, or if I don't, I have a snack where I have 2 tablespoons of butter, so lots of fat to easily digest it and absorb it. But you've got to have that component. So I think it really is something everyone should seriously consider, if they are really seeking to achieve those optimal benefits and protect themselves in the long run. It really is a form of insurance, and I think we definitely need health insurance to protect against accidents and catastrophes. But it's almost foolish to invest against that contingency and not make investments for the inevitable reality of some of these diseases that tend to progress as we age, and sort of inevitability unless we pass away prematurely from some accident, which is why we have health insurance, and wear seatbelts and have safety or airbags. So again, thank you for coming from Hawaii. Thank you for all the research you've done, for writing that document that really sensitized me to the great potential that astaxanthin had, and for all the benefit it provides for me and my family, and for all the work that you'll be continue to do.
Well, you thank me for coming from Hawaii. I want to thank you for being a very impartial person that looks for research-based things to recommend, and recommends only things that you feel comfortable are really going to help people, and for all you've done for this great product. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Oh, you're welcome. Because we do get lots of products. I mean, people don't know